Welcome to Crosstalk Solutions. My name's Chris, and today I'm very excited because I'm going to be unboxing and setting up a pair of NanoStation AC point-to-point wireless bridge units from Ubiquiti Networks. Now, this is the latest version of the NanoStation, the old version being the NanoStation M5. I'll put these side by side in a little bit so that we can compare. But what do you use this for? Essentially, you need to have two of them. And these can be used to create a wireless point-to-point bridge between two locations. So for instance, they're very versatile. You can use them for anything. But if you had, an outbuilding that you wanted to get internet to, a shed or something where you do work, a remote office, a remote building, a guest house, a pool house, if you had a barn where you want to have a camera attached so that you can just feed that camera into, your main house somewhere, essentially, that's what these are for, right? Just shooting an internet signal from one location to another. Now, on paper, it says that these can shoot an internet connection or a network connection. They can create a point-to-point wireless bridge of up to 15 kilometers. However, if you were going to do a 15-kilometer wireless bridge, I probably wouldn't use this device. There are better devices for those distances. But if you've got a relatively short distance, under 5 miles, this is going to be very good. This operates in the 5 gigahertz range. This is a NanoStation AC. And this device can do 450 megabits worth of throughput. There is also a little brother to this, which is the NanoStation AC Loco. It's a little bit smaller, it's a little bit cheaper. MSRP on this one is $99. MSRP on the Loco is $64. But this one does have some distinct advantages over the Loco, being that the Loco does not come with a PoE injector. The Loco is 24 volt passive PoE only, whereas this one is both 24 volt passive or 802.3 AF PoE. And this one also has a secondary Ethernet port, whereas the Loco does not. So what can you use that secondary Ethernet port? In this case where, for instance, if you want to have a camera at a remote location, you can use the secondary Ethernet port to not only supply network access to that camera, but also to power that camera with power over Ethernet. Okay, so let's go ahead. I'm going to bring the camera in close. We're going to get this thing unboxed, and I will talk a little bit more about it while I'm doing the unboxing. Okay, so here we go. Let's go ahead and pop open the case. Now, one of the main upgrades that they have given this device, and we should see some information about it right when you open the box. So here you can see some information right here about how to set this thing up. And notice that it's just showing pictures of an iPhone here. That's because this device has an integrated management radio, meaning that it has your 5 gigahertz radio that does the point-to-point wireless link, but in addition to that, there is an additional radio that allows you to set it up with the UNMS application. Now, this is older packaging, so you can see this thing right here. It's probably difficult to see, but it says U-Mobile. Now, U-Mobile is no longer the application that you use to set this up. Nowadays, the application you use is UNMS, and we will be showing that in just a couple minutes here when we actually get this thing set up. Okay, so here's the NanoStation itself. It's got these rounded edges now as opposed to the sharp edges on the last one. And that's all there is to it. On the side here we have our signal strength as well as the main and secondary LAN links. So those light up. This thing is perfectly weatherproof. I believe it's IP66 weatherproof if I'm not mistaken. And so again, this has no problem being out in the elements. Just put it right in the weather, no problem. Pop it open. Another nice little improvement. This case is, or the little opening is now held on there by a string or this plastic connector thing here. And then inside we have a couple ports. We have our main port, PoE in and main. We have a secondary port. This is for PoE pass-through. And then we have a little tiny reset switch if we need to reset it to factory defaults. Okay, let's take a look at what else comes inside the box. Quick start guide, we don't need that. PoE injector, this is a 24 volt PoE injector. We have this little mounting bracket here that has a level built in so that we can level out the device. And then finally, we have the power for the PoE injector and a couple of tie straps, as well as some mounting hardware for the actual mount. This is basically to mount this thing on a wall or any sort of flat surface. And then if you want to do it pole mounted, this is already curved here. You can kind of see there's a curvature there. So you can mount this directly to a pole, and you can use the included tie straps, or better yet, you'd want to use a hose clamp to get that attached to a pole. All right, side by side with the old unit, we can see that height-wise, the new one is just a little bit shorter. And you can see very clearly the rounded edges on the new one as opposed to the old one. We look at the thickness. This is also going to be a little bit of a slimmer profile. The old one had these huge plastic mount points that came out in order to mount it to a pole. And this one, again, they have sort of tightened that up quite a bit, so you can see the differences here in size. So this is a little bit less obtrusive, a little bit smaller, and definitely just a really slick, sleek design. I actually like these a lot, so we're going to set them up. Let's go ahead and next move over to the UNMS application. I'm going to fire this up. I'm going to power it up with 802.3 AF PoE, and then we're going to connect to it with UNMS and get the initial setup done, where I'm going to set up a static IP on the device, and then we're going to switch over to my computer for the remainder of the setup. Okay, so here we go. Normally I have this recording on my computer desktop, but since we actually have to connect to this network, you see this is NanoStation-5AC and then the MAC address of the NanoStation. So that's the management radio. So I've got the NanoStation plugged in right here. We can see the lights are going. We've got a power light, and we've got a network. The main network light is on and blinking. So when that is up, that means that the management network is ready to go. So we're going to first connect to the management network. There we go. And now we're going to flip on over to UNMS. There we go. So UNMS is loading. We can see I already have one NanoStation 5AC that I've set up. That's the other side. And we can see down here at the bottom, I'm connected to the wireless network NS-5AC and then the MAC address of this radio right here. Okay, so we're going to hit the plus sign in the bottom left-hand corner, and it should find this radio here. There we go. Okay, so NanoStation 5AC, by default, it's got 192.168.72.1. We're going to go ahead and click on it. And now we can see the default username and password's already filled in for us, UBNT. So we're just going to go ahead and say log in. There we go. Okay, so here's our terms and conditions. We accept our terms and conditions. We're going to click continue up here in the corner. And here we go. So here's all of our settings. Now, I'm not going to do a lot of the settings here. All I'm going to do is change the IP address so that I can then access it from my computer. But you can completely set this thing up right here in this device. It's just easier for me, for the purposes of making this video, to set up the network only and then do the rest of the config in the GUI interface. So here we have the management network. So I clicked on network, down here configuration, then network. Now I'm going to click on my IP address, and we're going to give it a new static IP address. So this one's going to be 192.168.200.39, and the gateway is 200.1. I'm also going to give it some DNS, and we're going to say done, and done. Now, when we go to hit save, it should prompt us to overwrite our password. So we're going to save, and there we go. So let's put in a new, stronger admin password, and then we're going to say done, and now it's saving the configuration. Okay, there we go. Configuration saved. At this point, let's just go ahead and click more, and then we're going to say reboot, and reboot the device. Okay, so back at my desk, before we get into the actual setup of the point-to-point wireless bridge, let's first take a look at the overview, the architecture, and here on my screen we have a Visio mock-up of what I'm actually doing here. So basically we have our two point-to-point wireless bridges. Here's the internet, comes into a USG, comes into an 8-port UniFi switch that's using 802.3 AF power to power the first NanoStation. That is going to be NanoStation AC 1. This is the access point side of the wireless bridge. So in the wireless bridge you have an access point where the information is coming from, and then you have a station side, which is where you're shooting the information to. Okay, so this is 192.168.200.39, and we're going to create an SSID called Forest, and the password is going to be show me the Wi-Fi. That's going to shoot across to a secondary NanoStation. This is NanoStation AC2. This is the station side of the wireless bridge with 192.168.200.38 is the IP address, and then same SSID and password information. This secondary one is going to be powering up a camera off of the secondary Ethernet port utilizing PoE once we're all said and done. Okay, so let's go ahead and close that down. Here is the login page, 192.168.200.39. And I'm going to log in with UBNT and then the password that I set during the UNMS application initial setup. Okay, so the first thing we get up here, it says management radio is temporarily enabled. It will be disabled after 8 minutes, blah, blah, blah. So it gives you a countdown. I think it's 15 minutes total from when you first turn it on. Now, the reason that you want to disable the management radio is that so it's not broadcasting that SSID anymore once you've gone through the initial setup. So at this point, I'm in, I've got my static IP set up. I don't need the management radio anymore, so I'm just going to go ahead and say disable now. Okay, so here we have the dashboard. We can see that the device is currently scanning through channels. It's looking for, the other side of a bridge right now, which I have not set up yet. So the first thing we want to do is make sure that we're on the latest and greatest firmware. So I gave it DNS IP addresses. I gave it a static IP, so it should have internet access at this point. Let's go ahead and click on Settings. And then we're going to click on the System tab. Now down here, by the way, this is where you can disable the management radio on startup. So I'm going to go ahead and say turn that off. So management radio on startup off, since I don't need that management radio working anymore. I'm also going to set my time zone, -8 Pacific Standard Time. And then let's go ahead and say, let's save those changes first. There we go. And now under here, under updates, we can see that it's currently firmware version WA.V8.4.2. Let's go ahead and say check now, and it's telling us that we have the latest firmware version, so that's good. Okay, so now that we have the latest firmware version, we want to set up the access point side of our wireless bridge. So let's click on the wireless tab. I'm still under settings, and for wireless mode, we're going to say access point, point to point. Okay, so there's a bunch of choices here. We've got access point, point to point. That's when you just have two of these devices. One needs to be the access point, point to point. One needs to be the station side, point to point. Then we've got access point, point to multi-point in an all AC environment. Then we have access point, point to multi-point mixed. Okay, so mixed means that you can do AC devices and regular 5 gigahertz like the old NanoStation 5, the M5. You could have those mixed together as stations in the same point to multi-point network. Then you also have station point to multi-point if this is a station in a point to multi-point network. But for our cases, we're just going to choose access point, point to point. The SSID we're going to set up is Forest, and then we want to set our password. So down here under wireless security, we're going to say WPA2AES, and then the pre-shared key is going to be show me the Wi-Fi. Let's see, show me the Wi-Fi. Make sure that looks good. Looks good. Okay, I'm also going to tune my output power down very low. I'm going to put it down to 0 dB. Reason being is that, the output power is how loud these things are screaming at each other. And since I'm only doing a very small test where they're going to be no more than about 50 feet apart, they don't need to be screaming at each other that loud in order to hear each other. Everything else for now, I'm just going to leave default, including the channel width. I'm going to leave that at 80 megahertz. And then we're going to go ahead and save those changes. Most of the time when you hit save change, it takes about 30 seconds to apply the changes because it actually does reboot the device when you do that. Okay, let's go back up to our dashboard. And here we can see that my remote device is already connected. And the reason being is because I've got two of these, and I had already set up the station side ahead of time. So these are, even though they're not pointing at each other, they're close enough to each other that they can be pretty much any orientation and still be connected with relatively good quality. In a little bit, we'll go ahead and put these outside and then test them a little bit further apart. But since we're on the subject of the station side, let's go ahead and pop into the station side and see how those settings are different. Okay, so here we are in the station. Now, the setup of the station side is identical to what I did in the other side. However, when you go over to settings and we're in wireless, the wireless mode is going to be station point to point instead of access point point to point. And if you're setting up the station after you've set up your access point, you should be able to click select and then find the actual wireless network that you want to connect to. So in this case, we can see a bunch of wireless networks. The only one I can actually select, though, is the one that says Forest, my SSID Forest. Okay, so that's about it for the setup of these two devices. Now, there's tons of settings, so you can get really granular with how these things are configured, but I just wanted to show in this video a very basic setup just to get you up and running. The point-to-point wireless bridge is now functional. So I'm going to take these devices, we're going to put them outside, we're going to strap them to some trees, and we're going to test the throughput from one side to the other, and we're also going to show how to enable the PoE pass-through to power up, for instance, a camera that is on the remote side of the wireless bridge. Stations are now outside, everything's set up, and we've got a lot to take a look at. So the first thing we're going to take a look at is UNMS. Now, I haven't done a lot of videos on UNMS. I did one on how to set it up in DigitalOcean, but I haven't really dug into it too much. So I wanted to show you that first. How do these nanostations show up in the UNMS interface? And here we can see right here, we have our NanoStation 5 ACs, and there are currently 2 of them. So now, if we click on one of these, we get all sorts of fun statistics about these devices. So we can see here, active, it's connected, here's its IP address, here's its uptime, here's the signal strength, here's the frequency and the channel width. We can see the mode that it's in, access point, point to point, the SSID that it's connected to, and the LAN status. So for this one, we can see that it is only connected, it's 1000 full duplex, on port 1, and port 2 is not connected, but if I go over to my secondary one, we can see that we have a device connected at 100 full duplex on the secondary port. That is because that device has the camera. Okay, so let's go back to the access point. And what else can we see here? We can see the sort of distance. We can see the transmit power, the transmit and receive change. In this case, it's a 2x2 MIMO antenna. MAC address, etc. Now, we can click on speed test. However, speed test is not yet available with the latest stable version of firmware. It says here your current firmware is 8.4.2. Required firmware for speed test is 8.5.0. So we're going to skip that. If we click on stations, we can see all of the stations that are connected to this access point. Now, if this was a point to multi-point, we would see more than just one. But since it's just point to point, all we see is the single point to point station. We can also click on statistics, and we can get our latency, CPU, RAM, signal strength, etc. So all sorts of different statistics that we can see through the UNMS interface. Okay, so we can also see that I have a camera set up. Now this camera is on the far end. It's on the station side of this bridge. You can see my window. This is the window where I'm recording this video right here. This little dot right here is the access point nanostation, and that's shooting all the way across to the other side. So let's take a look at the actual interface for the access point. Now what we can see here is our throughput. We're currently pushing between 2 to 6 megabits. The transmit is very small. Basically, this is just the HD video feed coming across the wireless link. We can see down here the throughput. Now, I had to turn off the capacity. If you turn on the capacity, the receive and transmit capacity, it basically scales the graph too high. And so I turned those off in order to get a better view of the throughput. But all you have to do is just click on these various items down below, and it will turn them on and off. So here we can see the access point has a receive throughput of about 3 megabits. And again, that 3 megabits is 2 things. That's the data that's pushing to UNMS, and that is the camera information that is coming from the G3 camera that's hooked up to the other side. Up towards the top here, we can see that I am in the 80 megahertz channel width, and we are taking up a good chunk of the spectrum right here. I manually set it to 5740, and it's taking up 5730 through 5810. Okay, so let's go ahead and run a speed test. Now, I've already done a few speed tests. I'm not entirely happy with the way that it is right now, but I have a theory that we're going to test as far as why the speed tests aren't giving me as much speed as I wish they were. Okay, so here I have my command prompt. Now, the way that I have this set up, my computer is in my LAN. The access point is also in my LAN. That shoots over to the station side. Everything's on a flat network, so this is the 192.168.200 network. And then from the station side, I have it wired directly into my laptop, which is actually just off camera right here where you can't see it. So on my laptop, I am running iPerf server. That's just iPerf3-S. That is the command. And then on my desktop here, I'm going to run the iPerf3, and then we're going to say this is the client side, and the server IP address is 192.168.200.235, which is the IP address that my laptop received. So let's go ahead and run this test. Okay, and so a couple of things. We had a sort of general or an average throughput of 165 megabits per second, which is not terrible. However, these devices are capable of more than that. If we look at the capacity up here, it says the throughput or the capacity is 647 megabits. I would actually expect it to be, closer to between 300 to 400 megabit. On this graph, we can also see the speed test that I ran here, or the iPerf test that I ran. It made a significant bump up in the bandwidth, close to 200 megabits, but not quite. So why did we not hit 200 megabits? Now, I've tried a number of things to get this speed up. I tried aligning the antennas as perfectly as I possibly could. I tried a whole bunch of different channels. I tried different channel widths, and I also messed around with the output power. None of that has been able to get me above about 160 to 170 megabits per second, when these are supposed to be able to do about 450 megabits per second. So the only thing left that I can think of is possibly the Fresnel zone in between these two antennas is being blocked. And as you can see here, I've got this huge mess of blackberries and salmonberries that's popped up. Through springtime and summer, stuff grows out here like crazy, and that is blocking probably 20 or 30% of the line of sight between these two devices. So the next step is to chop this down and see if I can clear out the Fresnel zone enough to increase the speeds. And if that doesn't do it, then I don't know what will. Okay, so after doing all of that work, clearing out all of that shrubbery, the maximum that I'm still able to squeeze out of this point-to-point link is about 170 megabits. Now, it's supposed to be able to do up to 450 megabits, so I'm not sure what's going on here. The only other thing that I can think of is perhaps the cable lengths that I'm using to shoot that all the way to the other side of the yard are just too long. I think that's a 100-foot cable. And then this one here is probably also about a 50 or 60-foot cable. They're also not outdoor rated cables. They're outside. Some of these cables have been outside for quite some time. Who knows what it could be? So I'm going to do one more test. And actually here, I'll show you two things here. Here's the speed test through iPerf. So we can see there we're looking at, again, about 170 megabits per second. We'll see what the average is. Yeah, 170 megabits per second average. And then built into these NanoStations, there's also a speed test. So let's go ahead and run that as well. If you click up here on the station list, the stations pop up down at the bottom, and then there's a speed test right here, and we can say run. Okay, and start. Now this runs for 30 seconds, and then we'll take a look at the results that we got from this speed test. Okay, so there you have it. The results of the speed test are in. The maximum that the speed test hit was 232.54 megabits on the transmit. And it did hit maximum of 503 megabits on the receive. You can see there's this one little spike here where it popped all the way up. But the receive average was 213 and the transmit average was 154. I should mention that I also switched the station and access point just as a test. So I have everything switched now, where the old station is now the access point and the old access point is now the station. So last test I'm going to do, I'm going to bring everything inside. I'm going to set it up right here, pointed directly at each other, and see what kind of speed tests we get locally. Okay, so final test, I have the first NanoStation set up right here in the window pointing that way, and I have the second one about 5 feet away just behind me here off camera. Now, I'm actually seeing worse speeds with this setup, so if we run our iPerf test one more time, we can see 157 drops down to 62, 76, etc. So it's actually giving me about 115 to 120 megabits average speeds. This one was even worse. This was 93.6 megabits per second average speed. Let's run the speed test from inside the unit. Okay, so again, we're seeing an average of 163 megabits on the transmit and 125 megabits on the receive, with max peaks of 297 megabits on the transmit and 249 megabits on the receive. And again, that's just the maximum. It just hit those speeds at some point. So I don't know, maybe my testing methodology is not good enough for those speeds, or maybe these units in whatever environment that I am in are only capable of, 170 to 200 megabits of sustained throughput. So I'm not sure. If you guys have any working examples of the NanoStation AC pushing more than, I'd love to see it pushing more than 300 megabit, let me know, because this is the type of thing that really bugs me, right? I get these devices, I set them up, I test them, and if it says it can do 450 megabits, I want to try to get as close to that 450 megabits as possible, and right now, I'm not even hitting half that capacity. So, again, just sort of bugs me, and but unfortunately, I am out of time for more testing on these NanoStations, and we got to get this video published. So, if you guys have any additional information or any constructive criticism on how I can improve my testing environment, please let me know down in the comments below. And I hope you guys enjoyed this video anyways. So if you did enjoy the video, please give me a thumbs up. By the way, before I sign off here, 170 megabits of sustained throughput is really nothing to shake a stick at. That's not bad. I mean, if I had a camera in a remote barn and I just wanted to have some Wi-Fi access and a camera, that's plenty for that purpose. Okay, so again, if you guys enjoyed this video, please give me a thumbs up. If you'd like to see more videos like this, please click subscribe. My name's Chris, the Crosstalk Solutions, and thank you so much for watching.